What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm very pumped for today's episode. It's been one that I've been waiting to record for quite a long time now. If you've been following me for a while, you already know that this has been a conversation that I've been sharing publicly for the past few months about birth control, and that I have been using the copper IUD for the past like 6 years now. And I just recently got it removed a few weeks ago. And so I wanted to share my experience with the copper IUD, educate on the copper IUD and hormonal birth control a little bit, really just share with you guys what the differences are. And honestly, my goal for this episode is to tell you what I wish I would have known when I was making these decisions for my health and my body. And so I've been thinking about getting my copper IUD out for a while now, and I finally did it. And so I'm going to talk you guys through the whole thing, kind of like the backstory behind why I chose the copper IUD in the first place, the signs and symptoms that my body was telling me that I was like, okay, it's time to get this thing out of you, and what I want you to know, obviously, as you're navigating this birth control journey for yourself. I think this is going to be one of my more personal episodes that I've recorded in quite a while. And again, I'm not here to scare you or to tell you what to do with your body. I'm here to educate you around birth control, both the copper IUD and the hormonal options, so that you can make the most informed decision for yourself. Okay. So my birth control backstory is that I was put on the pill at 16 when I first got into my quote unquote like serious relationship back in high school. Pretty standard story. I started having sex. My mom was like, you need to protect yourself. So I went on the pill, and what I thought that it was doing at the time, I felt like it was regulating my cycle. I felt like it was cleaning my skin. It was keeping me well protected. But at the end of the day, what I know now that it was actually doing is that it was shutting down my entire hormonal system entirely. And this is something that I didn't learn until years later, that the bleed that you get when you are on hormonal birth control is not a real period. It is what's called a withdrawal bleed. And it happens because of the drop in those synthetic hormones during the placebo week, and your uterine lining sheds in a response to that. So there's no ovulation behind it. That is what those like pill periods are. That's what's missing with them, rather, I should say, is that there's no ovulation, which means there's no real hormonal production or hormonal cycle that's going on, because your brain has been convinced that you are already full in terms of your hormones because you're consuming them exogenously. And so it stops sending those signals to your ovaries altogether. So the whole like hormonal system, that HPG axis is what it's called, it kind of goes quiet. So for me, from like 16 onward, I never actually had a real cycle. I thought I did, but I didn't. I went to college, like 18, 19. As you guys know, I struggled with an eating disorder in college. At that time, I was no longer in a relationship. I stopped the pill, but my period never came back because I was knee deep in an eating disorder. I was like sub 100 pounds. So I struggled with that. And even after being weight restored, quite honestly, I still didn't get a period back. I was eating over 2,500 calories a day. I didn't work out for 8+ months. I was quote unquote doing everything right to get my period back, but still nothing. Like I had no cycle. My junior year of college rolled around. I was like 20. I went back on the pill because I was now back in a new relationship. And the thing that I can remember from my experience on the pill in that season was being an emotional wreck. Like I never had a period, so it's not like it regulated my cycle. It did give me a withdrawal bleed, but I was just an emotional wreck. And at that time, I didn't necessarily blame it on the pill. I didn't attribute it to a pill. I chalked it off to like where I was in my life. I was still working through my eating disorder recovery, the normal pressures of, being 21. I was graduating with 2 different degrees. I was captain of the soccer team. Like I just had a lot on my shoulders and a lot on my plate. And so I kind of attributed the mental health challenges I was facing at that time to that. But looking back, I can kind of understand that like maybe the pill was really just like pouring gasoline on to this fire that I was already fighting in terms of my mental health. Now, that season of me being on the pill only lasted about 6 months before I went off of it again. Still no period. I was at a healthy weight. I was eating enough. I was working out. And, it eventually I just like kind of pushed it to the back of my mind. It wasn't like a core focus of mine that like, hey, you need to get your period back. I was, too distracted with all the other things that were going on in my life. Again, I was graduating with 2 degrees. I was starting my business. I was captain of the soccer team in college. And I was really focused on my bodybuilding journey at that time as well. So, 2020 rolls around. I, again, had started my business and I got into another new relationship. I faced that challenge of, okay, I need a birth control plan again. I need contraception again. And this time I wanted to take a different path because when I decided that I needed birth control again in 2020, I had already started becoming more aware around hormones and what the pill had been doing to my body. I, was a coach at this point, and I didn't want to put synthetic hormones into my body. I wanted to give my body the best chance, the best opportunity to get my period back naturally and to, just find its own rhythm. So I researched and I was advised on the non-hormonal birth control option, landing on the copper IUD. And everything that I was told by my doctor at that time confirmed exactly what I want to hear. Like, hey, it's non-hormonal. It's not going to impact your hormones. It won't suppress your ability to get your cycle back. You can still ovulate when you're on the copper IUD. And, if you continue to work on the holistic side of things, like your period will come back naturally. And yes, technically, all of that is true. But what no one told me, and what I've now learned with extensive detail through my own functional health training and my own lab work and things, is that non-hormonal does not mean no systemic effects on your hormones. It just means it's not directly impacting that brain to ovary communication that we were talking about earlier. But when we think about how the copper IUD actually works, which I was never educated on until I, became a functional practitioner, the copper IUD works by creating continuous low-grade inflammation inside of your uterine environment. Copper ions release into your tissue, creating this oxidative damage that is toxic to sperm. That's the mechanism. The entire thing is built off of creating inflammation inside of your body. And let's be honest, there's no way that inflammation stays local to your uterine environment. Like, it's mind-blowing for me to even talk about on this podcast now. Like, I so wish I could go back to that version of me in 2020. But hindsight's 2020, right? I wish I didn't know. I wish I knew that, but I didn't. And, I knew it was a non-hormonal option and that felt good enough for me. So I got it inserted and I've had it ever since until now. And there have been a lot of symptoms, especially recently, that have popped up for me that I'm like, okay, I've done a lot of things holistically to try to improve these symptoms. And I have seen some improvements, but honestly, I still struggle with a lot of things that someone who is so dialed in shouldn't. And that's how I feel. That's what I believe. Now, I was able to get my period back naturally at the end of 2023, which was a huge accomplishment for me. I'm recording this episode in the middle of 2026. So it's been almost 3 years that I've had my period, quote unquote, back. Yet it's never been regular. It's irregular both symptom-wise and irregular with timing. And that just feels like a big red flag to me, despite all of the things that I've been doing and trying and the labs I've been getting and the practitioners that I've hired and all of that stuff. So I wanted to share with you guys some of the big red flag symptoms that popped out for me that were like, okay, it's time to get your copper IUD out of you. It's doing more harm than good at this point. And so the biggest one that I really feel like does not get talked about enough on social media or just in general for women's health, and that is PMDD. I was not just struggling with bad PMS, PMDD. The week before my period, I would emotionally fall apart. I was so emotionally dysregulated in a way that did not feel like me. I would experience intense anxiety without having any real reason or cause behind it. I just wanted to cry 24/7. I was irritable in a way that I felt like I couldn't control. And I just felt like I was living inside of someone else's body with someone else's mind. This intense sadness that I just couldn't explain. I'll get very vulnerable with you guys here for a second, because I've shared my struggles with depression in the past. And I've also shared that I am a firm believer that part of depression, in my opinion, is hormonal, is metabolic. But something that was a big trigger for me was one day I was walking on a trail around my house, and I was having a very hard mental health day. And I saw a red cardinal, which I always feel that red cardinals are a sign that my dad is around. They are typically like the sign of a loved one who has passed on. And my first thought was like, that is a sign that I should go be with him. Like, I didn't want to be on this earth anymore at that moment. And I can so logically pull myself out of those deep, dark thoughts. But that is just to paint you guys the picture. Like, those were the struggles. And there was no valid reason for feeling that way. Like, on the outside, my life is great, right? And so the way that I knew that my period was coming within the next like 24 to 48 hours is because I would feel like a stranger from a mental health standpoint. And so that was a big red flag to me. And that pattern is not normal. It's also not a coincidence that it tracked so closely with my luteal phase, that it tracked so closely with those first few days before I was about to get my period, because that is the time when your progesterone should be rising. And copper's downstream effects that it has on both zinc and serotonin are the most pronounced during that phase of your cycle, because when zinc is depleted as a byproduct of copper, zinc helps with your progesterone production, which keeps my progesterone super low, which kind of explains all the other symptoms that I will share with you guys later on. But that very low progesterone paired with elevated estrogen, because sometimes the copper IUD can cause estrogen dominant like environment, that was what was kind of going on for me and causing that PMDD type of symptoms. Now, the second thing was I was puffy, like constantly, can still be at this time, because I don't think my body has fully rebounded quite yet from it. But puffy, constantly, like not just bloated in a digestive way, and not just like inflamed and puffy in a digestive way, but my face, my fingers, my ankles, like the kind of puffiness where your socks leave an indent, or my jeans will leave a line down my leg, because I was just like swollen and holding on to water. And this is a very common symptom of estrogen dominance, which I just kind of explained, happens both as a byproduct of increased estrogen environment from the copper toxicity, and also from not having enough progesterone to balance out that estrogen. I also have struggled with acne for the past couple of years in a way that like I never really used to before. And I also noticed that acne flare was synonymous with my cycle as well. So it's definitely acne that's targeted in my like chin, lower face, jawline. And it was very much timed with my luteal phase, like clockwork. Short cycles is also something that I was experiencing. So typically my cycles were anywhere between 14 and 21 days instead of, the typical like 28 to 35 days. This also typically happens when you have estrogen dominance, when your body's not producing enough progesterone. It shortens that luteal phase a ton. And the last one was constipation and bloating, specifically in my luteal phase. Now, I do feel like I experience constipation and bloating more frequently than just my luteal phase, but my luteal phase is when it would like be on steroids every single month. Like I struggled to use the bathroom the week before I would get my period. Things would get super uncomfortable. My lower belly would be visibly distended by the end of the day. And this is not a random symptom. Again, that elevated copper and estrogen, decreasing zinc, lower progesterone, even like the sluggish liver function. This was something that showed up on my labs. So both from a symptom side of things and from a lab side of things, like my blood work, my liver enzymes were very elevated. And I since have been able to pull my liver enzymes down. I've also been able to pull my inflammation markers down. But when I first got those back this time last year, they were extremely elevated. And I would attribute part of that to the copper IUD. I don't think I can contribute all of that to the copper IUD because I since have been able to make some shifts in my lifestyle holistically to bring those down to a healthier level. But I do think that they were impacting my body's just drainage and detox ability because of the inflammation that it was causing. And we know that when your body is experiencing extreme inflammation, that also triggers your cortisol and your adrenals to be on overdrive, which when I got my labs back this time last year, my adrenals were depleted. I was in extreme adrenal fatigue. So yeah, none of these symptoms were really, I can't say that they just like popped up out of the blue. They were all happening for the past, I would say, 2 to 3 years. And I was doing all the things that I could with my lifestyle and my diet and my sleep and my stress management. But eventually it just felt like I had one foot on the gas trying to heal. And there was this foot on the brakes that was like, nope, you can be doing all the right things on the outside, but this internal root cause of the copper IUD was just going to continue to hold me back no matter what I did or how hard I tried. So yeah, that's kind of my experience and why I decided to get it out. Now, I wanted to clear something up too about, the big difference between the copper IUD and hormonal birth control. Because choosing the copper IUD over hormonal birth control is not automatically a safer choice. And again, I wish I knew this when I was making this decision. It's not a safer choice, it's just a different choice. And that's something that I didn't always understand on my journey. So I think it's important for me to emphasize in this episode. They just work with different mechanisms, and therefore they have different risks, some of which may overlap more than you expect, and some are going to be different. So the hormonal birth control, the pill, the hormonal IUD, the patch, the ring, again, it works by flooding your system with those synthetic hormones at levels that are high enough to convince your brain to stop communicating with your ovaries, which means ovulation is going to stop. And when ovulation stops, your body isn't producing its own estrogen and progesterone anymore. And then there are tons of things downstream from that, because we know that estrogen and progesterone, yes, they're your sex hormones, but they do tons of other things inside of your body. So all of those other things that they do inside of your body are going to be compromised, right? So everything downstream, mood, metabolism, libido, thyroid, gut, skin, are all affected by the suppression of your body's natural estrogen and progesterone production and cycling, right? Because they work in a cycle, just like our cortisol works in a cycle. Now, the copper IUD, again, just works differently. It keeps your cycle intact. You still ovulate. Your brain is still communicating with your ovaries. Your hormones are still natural hormones to your body. And for someone like me, coming off of the pill, not having a period, in desperate need to get my brain to ovary communication back on, it really felt like that was the right choice at that time. But it's creating systemic inflammation inside of my body, and that's basically how it's working to prevent pregnancy. Both actually are creating systemic inflammation inside of your body. Both are depleting your body of critical nutrients that it needs to support your metabolic functions and other hormonal processes. Both are affecting your gut health as a whole. Both have downstream hormonal consequences that are important for you to know. And that's what I want to get across to you. So whenever someone asks me, like, which is better, I genuinely can't answer that with one right answer. I think it really depends on your health picture. It depends on your mineral status, your lifestyle, your labs, like your liver function, your stress load, your adrenal health, your current hormonal levels from a sex hormone standpoint I'm referring to. So yeah, it really just depends on you. So I would encourage you to do your own research, and regardless of which direction you choose, whether it's hormonal birth control, the copper IUD, no birth control at all, know how to support your body while using it. And that's what I want to jump to, is just giving you guys a general framework, because whenever I have a client who comes to me on birth control, they go on a birth control support plan that fills the gaps that birth control kind of creates in these other areas of your health journey. because this episode is not here telling you to remove your IUD or stop birth control. That is a very personal decision, and there are very real reasons why birth control is the right choice for a lot of women. But if you're staying on it, whether that is the pill, hormonal IUD, copper IUD, you need to be actively supporting your body systems that your birth control is kind of working against. You cannot take it and just do nothing, because you will have consequences. There will be side effects. So if you're on the pill or hormonal IUD, you need to replenish the nutrients that it depletes. At a minimum, you need to be on a high quality multivitamin that covers your bases in terms of B vitamins, folate, zinc, and selenium. Magnesium glycinate is going to be a big one. CoQ10, if fatigue is a symptom for you. Those are going to be big things that you are going to want to replenish from a nutrient standpoint. Omega-3s are also another big one. Managing that inflammation proactively with omega-3s, anti-inflammatory eating, adequate sleep, stress management. These aren't just like fluffy lifestyle recommendations. They are directly countering the inflammatory state that the pill is creating for you. And then your gut is going to be the other piece. Your gut and your liver, I should say, your digestion and your detoxification processes. So gut-wise, making sure you're eating enough fiber. I also put all of my clients on a safe probiotic to help maintain a balance of your gut microbiome that the pill disrupts. It disrupts your gut microbiome. So fiber and a high quality probiotic, and then liver wise to support your body's detoxification and drainage pathways, cruciferous veggies, hydration, just removing your overall toxic load from other places, your skincare, your cleaning products, the things that you're cooking with, trying to choose non-toxic as much as possible so you're not filling your body's toxic load unnecessarily, since you're already kind of incorporating something in like the pill. Now, if you're on the copper IUD, all of these things pretty much still apply to you. You really want to monitor your zinc and copper levels, ideally through something called a hair tissue mineral analysis. That's actually something I got a few months ago that showed massive imbalances in my electrolytes and also my zinc and copper levels, my mineral levels. And that's from a cellular level. So it's different than testing those levels in your serum or your blood work. It's testing it through your tissues, like your hair tissue. So it's more so on a cellular level. What is your mineral status? So zinc-rich foods are also going to be something you really want to prioritize. Red meat, shellfish, pumpkin seeds, legumes, those are going to be crucial. And then also your adrenals, because healthy adrenals are helpful for managing your copper load. When your adrenal function is compromised, like mine was, that is going to create an environment where copper can accumulate. So supporting your adrenals are the basics. We talk about this on a lot of my podcast episodes. Sleep, blood sugar stability, and nervous system support are going to be the biggest needle movers here. Your liver drainage for the same reasons as the pill. And then just honestly, always making sure you're getting lab work done. So you're staying on top of the things that are shifting. You're looking at your inflammation status inside of your body. You're getting a full thyroid panel done so that you can make sure your metabolic health is staying nice and strong. You're looking at your red blood cells and your mineral status like magnesium, zinc, ferritin, B12, folate. At a minimum, you need to be getting these done annually. If not, I would say every 6 months is probably best. And that's what I do. So yeah, that is today's podcast episode. If you are someone who's thinking about coming off of birth control, whether it is hormonal or not, and you're curious about what that would look like to support your body with coming off of these things, because post-birth control syndrome is very real. That's a very, very real thing. When you hear stories of people coming off of the pill and they gain all this weight and their acne flares up and it's like their body goes crazy those first few months. They're losing their hair. That's something that I've seen with a few of my clients is coming off of birth control and losing their hair. It's very important that you are supporting your body leading up to that removal and after that removal. So specifically for me, I'll share from my own experience. What I did is making sure that my zinc was replenished. Like that is a supplement that I've been on for quite some time now. I've also been really supporting my liver function with a supplement specific to my liver, also with castor oil packs to help my body with the detoxification process. Obviously, like I mentioned, supporting my adrenals is crucial here. I've been on a really high quality multivitamin to just replenish some of those depleted nutrients from having this inside of my body for so long. And then also I'm on a EPA/DHEA supplement. It's basically a very high potent omega-3 to help lower inflammation inside of my body, which, like I said, my labs have already shown massive improvements in all those areas even before getting it removed. So I'm very excited, and I can even record like a follow-up episode sharing with you guys how I'm feeling, 90 days or even 6 months after making this decision for myself. I will say, when I shared about this on my social media, I was flooded in my DMs with women sharing with me success stories with getting their copper IUD removed and how they literally felt like a whole new woman in the first 30 days. And I will say, I, from a mental standpoint, haven't felt so good in myself and in my life. Body image wise, I haven't really seen much shifts. It's literally been like a week and a half, but mentally, I feel clearer and I feel happier. I'm also in my ovulatory phase. I haven't hit a luteal phase yet, but I'll keep you guys posted. Thank you guys for tuning in. I've been talking about getting this removed for about a year now. It's obviously a very sensitive conversation and an important conversation to have with not just you, also with your significant other. And it's been something we've been talking about for a while. It's a transition that I was scared to make because I had such irregular cycles. I have been unsure of what birth control would look like for us, without having the IUD. But at the end of the day, we both kind of agreed that this was the best decision to make for my longevity, my long-term health. And I am very excited to see what changes as a byproduct of that. Also, with me studying functional health for the past year and a half, running all these labs on myself, knowing what mineral ratios should look like, knowing the signs and symptoms of estrogen dominance and copper toxicity, it really just emphasized, yep, this is the next best step for me in my healing journey. So I'll keep you posted on everything, the transition, the shifts, what I'm continuing to support inside my body, how my cycle responds to this. It's kind of, real life documentation, but yeah, hope this was helpful for you guys. If there's someone in your life who, has been struggling with their journey coming off of the pill or birth control, or struggling with making their decision around birth control for their body, send this episode their way. And hopefully, more of these conversations begin to exist in the space.